built on the curriculum, using the bulwarks of what we've discussed in class. I can cobble together something that's representative of the learning process that has gone on or should have gone on in the context of our discussions. Ethics is a strange thing, though. Ethics is ethereal, it's intangible, it's a process more than it is a product. And so I've struggled with it more than I have for other classes and other times. I think, though, that I've come up with a solution. Now, I have not set you on a false trail. What I told you before still stands. However, I'm able to make it, to dimensionalize it so that you can get your arms around it, get your minds around it, and actually do something that I think is appropriate to our studies, but something that is easier to understand as well. And so what I want to do is talk to you about the propensity towards unethical behavior, unethical communications in the digital environment, but I have couched it as if it will be the mainstream culture for the future. That is, we're getting away from traditional newspaper, radio, television. With the convergence of media, media is going to change. Our society will reflect that change, maybe even enhance that change. And so we have to wonder how it will affect, or will it affect, ethics going forward. So what I've set up here is that a peek at the future, and I'm looking at all the kinds of things relative to digital advertising, online advertising, customer relationship management, globalism, an increased sense of globalism, virtual communities, social networking, and I want to talk to you about how brands will be built in the future, what marketing will be all about in the future, and what's the big idea, what's going to be the big idea in the future, and what's the first thing to consider, what's the second thing to consider in the future. And so rather than telling you something's amuck here in the digital environment and just setting you loose on this giant kind of pie that forcing you to eat it all, I'm going to cut off a smaller section of pie. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that these kinds of activities will be much more thoughtful heading into the future, just because they have to be. I think at the same time that they'll get more thoughtful, I think that they will also be subject to less scrupulous ethics involved. And so I want you to be sensitive to that. So I'm going to paint this picture of what I think your paper should be. So let me get into that in just a minute, though. Today, by the end of this class, you'll be able to organize your thoughts, ideas, and concepts towards the final project regarding the nature of ethical versus unethical communications in a future digital, I might say, social networking environment. In order to appraise, assess, clarify any confusion about ethical versus unethical communications, especially as it relates to the likely future, a digital world model. And so the homework really is start building your final project, okay? And the final project, well, let's talk about this. Networking in the digital age of advertising, a peek at the future. Of course, you know that, I'll give you some preamble as I roll up on your project here. Ethics in digital advertising and marketing is changing, and it's changing because technology is changing, because our capabilities are changing, because our demographics are changing, because our preferences as a consuming audience are changing. And I speak both as an advertiser and as a member of a consuming audience, and that's how you guys should look at it too. It's changing at a more rapid rate than the laws are able to change. So it's changing at a more rapid rate than the laws governing the digital world can be created and enforced. This places a stronger reliance on the overall ethical code, not only from the regulatory agencies, not only from the governments, not only from those far-seeing, far-reaching legal entities. It really goes to who you are as a person. It really goes to who each of you is related to your personal code of ethics. relative to advertising and marketing. So it goes to you folks who will be those professionals operating in this digital environment. Let's talk about that a little bit. As students right now, you have grown up in the computer age much more than I have. I was thinking as I drove down here today, trying to preface my thoughts, I was thinking, you know, I grew up in a world that didn't have, I mean, we barely had television. I grew up in a world, not that I'm an old fogey, it's just how rapidly technology is changing. I grew up in a world where Alaska and Hawaii weren't states. I mean, I remember when they became states. I remember before there was a time when men were on the moon, before there was space travel. I remember a time before there were computers. The word computer was kind of new to me, as a matter of fact, and I admit having to have been dragged kicking and screaming into the computer age. You know, I refused to play Pong, for crying out loud, because I thought it was a fad. So I'm not saying that I suddenly have been given the gift of farsightedness now and I can look into the future, but I am content with the future. I'm content with computers. I am content with seeing how quickly things are changing, and I recognize that online advertising is not going to go away. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It may be that we no longer use the term online advertising because it will be advertising and there will be no such thing as offline advertising. Advertising is advertising is advertising. Online, offline, it just will be. There will be a time when you can no longer go to the corner and for 25 or 50 cents buy a newspaper. You will go to your computer and pull up the daily newspaper. Might be called something else. It certainly will look like something else. It'll be easier to digest and easier to read in a digital environment. Will it be better journalism? I don't know. Will it be a more ethical journalism? I think no, not at first. Certainly not at first. Maybe it will be eventually, but not at first. Moving on to another topic. CRM is a well-regarded discipline in today's environment. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. What does that mean? Well, you buy something, you become a customer, you become a member, you join a club, you buy a book, you do something, you fill out a customer satisfaction survey form, you become a customer. Today, you become a record in a database. And so how that company chooses to treat you becomes their customer relationship management motif. If they contact you every 3 months and say, Joe, how you doing? You still happy with the box of left-handed widgets that you bought? Everything cool with that? Is there anything else can we say? How we got a new bunch of right-handed widgets that just came in. Is that something you'd be interested in? How about, you know, widgets make the perfect holiday gift, you know, and they're working you, yes, legitimately, but you have a relationship with them. You like their widgets. So they're treating you as a customer, but if you were to say, you know, I got a problem. 11 of those widgets were fine, one of them really sucked, it broke, it cracked. How they treat you as an important customer is their customer motif. It kind of sets the table as to how they're going to be judged, at least by you and perhaps potentially by others. Customer relationship management techniques may be they send you a card on your birthday, Chris, because they've got that data. It's just sitting there idle. It's not being used. And they treat you like a friend as well as a customer. So they send you a birthday card. And they remind you that clogs or whatever you wear, you know, what's the other one I'm thinking, Crocs. Crocs are on sale, blah, 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 and if you act now, you can do it. But it's only a special offer. It's for you. And Joel, who's not a member of this community of customers, he doesn't get the offer. It's special for you. Now, if they burn you and say, oh, it's special for you, $1 a pair, and then they turn around and offer it to everybody for $1 a pair, you're not so freaking special anymore. And that will weigh on you somehow. But it is their customer relationship management techniques, motif, discipline, or lack thereof that will be the way you regard them in the future. Globalism. Maybe there's a small podunk company in East Oshkosh that makes the finest buggy whip in the world. And it used to be that only the Amish came to buy their buggy whips there. And they sold 25 gross of buggy whips a year. And all of a sudden, because of this digital environment, They're able to sell buggy whips to Amish people all over the world, to African tribesmen who don't have motorized vehicles but use them to drive their cattle, to people in Austria, people in France, all over the world. So now they're still a little tiny company in Austria, in Oshkosh, but they're selling buggy whips all over the world. They have achieved, for whether they wanted to or not, for good or for bad, they have achieved a level of globalism, and they have to think globally. They have to think, even in terms of advertising design. You know, white may be the color of virginity and purity in this country. White in Japan is the color of mourning, is the color of death. The number 3 may be lucky in some countries, as the number 13 truly is in many countries. The number 4 is lucky in other countries, and it means nothing in other countries. The universal 7 is a lucky number. It doesn't hold true. It's downright unlucky in some countries. So they have to think about the cultures and the customs and the language and the traditions and the histories. They have to truly become this tiny little company in Oshkosh, East Oshkosh. They have to become a global company. This can only happen in a digital environment. It couldn't have happened by them running a small space ad in Buggy Week Annual, or Buggy Whip Annual every year. So it happens in a digital environment. It's a new reality, peak of the future. Virtual community, let's say, I'm reaching for an example here, but let's say you are a curling fan. You know what curling is? Did you see it used to be? It was an exhibition Olympic sport where they take these polished granite stones and roll them down the ice. Not a lot of people are curling fans, but you're a curling fan and you live here. And the other curling fan with whom you blog back and forth weekly, if not daily, lives in Vancouver, or lives in Austria, or he lives in East Oshkosh. You're part of a virtual community. You are friends, you are colleagues, you are confidants, you write back and forth, you share opinions with people you've never even seen, people whose names you may not know. You know them by their online names. And this is a new phenomenon. It's tribalism run amok. If you ever read a book that came out quite a while ago called The Territorial Imperative, it's called, and the author's name is way back in my head because it's an old book. It's about 30 years old, but it's a great book about tribalism and becoming super tribes and all this. It's all was written at a time when computers were still kind of on the cusp. Desmond Morris is the author's name. Desmond Morris. And it's called The Territorial Imperative. It's about how we evolved from earlier primates, and we lived in clans, and we became tribes, and we became super tribes, and now we're faced with this great civilization, and we have to somehow manage with our instincts towards tribalism. It's all coming